Amidst the vast expanse of the African savanna, where the sun casts brilliant golden streaks and the roar of predators asserts authority, there lies a hidden corner bathed in a haunting silence. In the twilight shadows of a dry rock crevice, only the gasping, intermittent, and trembling breaths of a tiny creature fading from exhaustion can be heard. As the first rays of dawn creep through the thorn bushes, they do not reveal the majesty of nature, but rather illuminate a painful tragedy. Leo, a gaunt lion cub caked in mud and dried blood, is huddled into a small, frail ball. His amber eyes are wide, filled with a deep horror, as if he is still witnessing the brutal events of the previous night. Not far away, the wild, ghostly laughter of hyenas still lingers in the wind before vanishing into the void, leaving Leo alone in a world that has just lost everything. Leo is not just an orphan. He is a soul shattered before he even had the chance to grow. When rescuers found Leo, they realized that while the scars on his flesh would heal, the wounds in his mind might bleed forever. While other cubs might stretch and curiously greet the world, Leo chose to withdraw into the darkness, refusing all connection. An invisible fear strangled the instincts of a future king, turning him into a stranger to his own kind. A painful question is posed to us all. What happens when a king forgets the royal blood flowing in his veins? What happens when every time you look down into the water, you don't see your own reflection, but the monster that took your family away? Leo was living in a distorted reality, where an ordinary mirror could become a gateway to a hell of memories. At the Wildlife Rescue Center, Leo was now physically safe, but his soul remained trapped somewhere in the dark night of the past. The high walls and abundant food could not bring him peace. Instead of playing or exploring his new environment, Leo spent most of his time pressing himself into the darkest corner of his enclosure, his eyes constantly guarding against the slightest movement. Dr. Sarah, an animal psychologist with boundless patience, observed Leo for hours through a small peephole. She noticed a peculiar behavior. Leo had an intense fear of anything reflective. He would bolt if he caught his reflection in a stainless steel water trough, and he absolutely refused to drink if the water in the semi-wild area was as still as a flat sheet of paper. To understand this obsession, Sarah decided on a bold experiment. She installed a large, heavy-duty mirror in the middle of Leo's living space. This was not merely a scientific test, but an effort to force him to face the ghost that gnawed at his soul every day. When the curtain covering the mirror was drawn back, the air in the room seemed to thicken. Leo's racing heartbeat could be heard through his frantic breaths. As he slowly and tremblingly approached the glass, all surrounding sounds seemed to fade, leaving only the whistle of the wind through the leaves and the thumping in his chest, vibrating with terror. Then, horror struck. Through Leo's eyes, reality was warped by immense pain. He did not see a golden-furred cub. Instead, in his traumatized mind, Leo saw a fierce hyena with jagged fangs, standing right behind the glass and watching him with hungry eyes. This was the killer who had taken his mother's life, the one who sowed terror on that fateful night. Leo went wild, letting out heart-wrenching cries, a hybrid sound between a weak roar and a desperate sob. He lunged at the mirror, using his tiny claws to peer at the cold glass surface, trying to destroy the monster taunting him. But the painful truth was that the more he attacked, the more aggressively the hyena fought back, mirroring his every move with precision. Sarah stood frozen, watching from a distance, her heart swelling with infinite pity. She realized that Leo wasn't just afraid of hyenas. He was afraid of himself, because he believed he had become the embodiment of weakness and failure. In the harsh world of lions, the loser is often erased, and Leo was punishing himself for surviving alone. He looked in a mirror and saw an enemy because, in his heart, he felt he no longer deserved the title of a great beast. The days that followed were a stalemate. Leo refused to eat, his already gaunt frame becoming even more emaciated. Every time he saw the mirror, He fell into a state of extreme panic, curling up and tucking his head between his legs, like a child trying to escape the real world. Sarah knew that if she couldn't help Leo change how he saw himself, this lion would die of exhaustion before he ever grew up. This was no longer a battle against an inanimate object. It was a war to reclaim the identity of a king from the ghosts of the past. Seeing Leo collapse, Dr. Sarah understood that if she used force or coercion, she would lose the cub's trust forever. She decided on a strategy she called silent presence. Sarah did not remove the mirror, but she covered it with a soft cloth and moved it to the furthest edge of the enclosure. She wanted Leo to get used to its existence as a harmless object rather than a direct threat. Every day, Sarah spent hours sitting outside the fence, a safe distance away. She did not look him in the eye, an act considered a challenge in the animal world, but simply sat there, reading a book or murmuring in a steady, warm tone. This was the phase of building the bridge of trust. Sarah began using gentle connection techniques. She brought toys scented with savanna grass or cloths carrying the scent of adult lions to stimulate the instincts buried deep within Leo. Initially, Leo remained curled in the corner, but Sarah's persistence began to pay off. His small ears started to twitch at the sound of her voice. Curiosity, the feline's strongest trait, gradually began to win over fear. One afternoon, after nearly a month, Leo dared to step out of the shadows to sniff the cloth Sarah had left near the fence. It was a small victory, but a giant leap in the psychology of a traumatized soul. As Leo began to accept Sarah's presence, she took another step in the therapy, facing the ghost. Every day, Sarah raised the cloth covering the mirror by just a few inches. At first, Leo growled again, but because of the distance and Sarah's reassuring presence, he no longer lunged in a frenzy. Sarah started using toys to distract him. She used a long feather to play with Leo right in front of the mirror. As Leo focused on chasing the feather, he accidentally caught glimpses of his own shadow in the mirror. This time, instead of seeing a full hyena, he saw a faint silhouette moving in sync with him. Sarah realized that the key to healing Leo was helping him reconnect with his own body. He needed to understand that those legs, that tail, and those eyes were not the enemies. She began reflex stimulation exercises.
That's it.
When Leo lifted his left paw, the image in the mirror lifted its left paw. He began to stop, tilting his head left and right, observing intently. The tension in Leo's chest seemed to ease every time he recognized the absolute correlation between his actions and the shadow before him. It was a process of relearning from scratch, much like a child learning to recognize themselves. These moments lacked dramatic flair, but were filled with the power of patience. Leo began to eat more. His ragged fur gradually became smooth and glossy. He no longer shunned the light. Sarah knew the fear of the hyena was still there, lurking in the folds of his memory. But now Leo had a new weapon, his own presence. He began to learn that while the past could be a nightmare, the present was a reality he could touch, feel, and control. This thawing was slow, but it was as firm as roots gripping the earth after a great storm. The real turning point came on a stormy afternoon, when the savanna sky suddenly turned a deep purple and dark clouds rolled in, bringing the cold breath of the early rains. Thunder rumbled from the horizon, a sound that to Leo was no different from the gunshots of years ago or the cackling of hyenas on that fateful night. The space grew dark, and flashes of lightning tore through the sky, creating dancing ghosts on the walls. Leo began to lose control. He ran frantically through the enclosure, his breath coming in gasps, his eyes clouded with a rising terror. In his panic, he charged straight toward the giant mirror, which Sarah had now completely uncovered. In a blinding flash of lightning, Leo froze. In the mirror, the image of that fierce hyena appeared again, larger and more terrifying than ever under the blue light of the bolt. It bared its teeth, its eyes red as if mocking his weakness. Leo let out a cry of pain, but this time, instead of running or attacking wildly, he stood still. A surge of primal instinct suddenly ignited in his small chest. Leo looked down at his paws, claws that were sharper now, muscles that had grown firm after months of care. He looked back at the image in the mirror, and for the first time, he realized an obvious truth. The monster was also trembling. It wasn't as strong as he had imagined. It was merely a reflection of his own fear. In that breathless moment of confrontation, Leo no longer saw a pitiful orphan cub. He saw a creature whose mane was beginning to grow, with amber eyes burning with a fire that no longer sought escape. A powerful sense of self-awareness washed over him. Leo stepped close to the mirror, his breath fogging the cold glass. He didn't lunge to kill. Instead, he slowly pressed his forehead against the glass. It was a gesture of acceptance. He was touching his pain, touching the enemy in his mind to say, "I am no longer afraid of you." At that moment, thunder crashed directly overhead, but Leo did not flinch. He gathered his strength, puffed out his chest, and let out a roar. A true lion's roar, no longer the hoarse whimper of the hunted. That roar echoed throughout the sanctuary, drowning out the wind and rain, marking the collapse of a long-held illusion. The hyena in his mind vanished completely, replaced by the image of a young king standing tall and proud in the heart of the storm. Sarah, watching from afar, burst into tears. She knew that from this moment on, the mirror had fulfilled its mission. It was no longer a door to hell, but a witness to a rebirth. Leo no longer saw the enemy in the mirror because he had finally found himself. Time passed over the savannah like a restless river, carrying the painful memories of the past deep into the earth. Leo was no longer the shy cub of yesterday. He had grown into a majestic adult, with a golden mane shimmering under the sun and the powerful gait of a true lord. The sanctuary was no longer a prison protecting him, but a kingdom where he belonged. Every evening at dusk, Leo would stand on the highest rock, gazing out into the distance. When he looked down at the still pond at his feet, he no longer searched for ghosts or fears hyenas. The reflection in the clear blue water was a proud beast with eyes shining with confidence. That gaze did not just represent physical strength. It was the symbol of a soul healed and mended from broken pieces. The greatest change in Leo was not in his physique, but in a strange empathy he held for the world around him. One day, the center received a new member, Kina, a lion cub who had just experienced a tragedy similar to Leo's. Kina curled up in a dark corner, her eyes filled with terror and despair, refusing all help from humans. Witnessing this scene, like seeing a mirror of his younger self, Leo did something that amazed all the rescuers. Instead of asserting territorial dominance, Leo slowly approached the fence separating the two areas. He didn't growl and challenge, but emitted low, vibrating purrs, a specific reassuring sound lions use to comfort their own. Leo stood there, as patient as Dr. Sarah had once been for him. He found a way to catch Kina's attention and led the small cub to a puddle left after the rain, where the sunlight sparkled. When Kina looked down at the water and began to tremble at the old illusions, Leo gently used his large paw to touch the water's surface, creating ripples that blurred the haunting reflection. Then, he lowered his head, nuzzling his mane against the iron bars as a promise of protection and sharing. That act was a transmission of hope. Leo had transformed his pain into a medicine for others. He proved that when we overcome our own darkness, we become a light for the path of others. Leo's story ends with a resonating message. In life, each of us has mirrors that reflect our fears, weaknesses, and past failures. But if we are brave enough not to turn away, and persistent enough to look through those illusions, we will realize that the power to change our destiny always lies within ourselves. Leo didn't just survive, he truly lived. His roar echoed across the land, no longer a cry of despair, but the anthem of a king who had reclaimed the throne within his own soul.